Sometimes the automatic extraction of the data from the PDF files of the safety datasheets is not possible due to the format limitations of the provided file, and in such a case, you are given an option to enter the data manually as well if needed. This is done by simply clicking on the plus droplet sign on the top right corner, and you simply enter the information of your chemicals manually. I'll guide you through this process. This process is called the product creation process, and the application simply guides you through all of the steps which are necessary to create a new product, new chemical inside of the application manually. I'll just fill out the required field. I'll enter its test product 1. I'll just use our default holder for the presentations, and you can add a description. You can say it's a chemical product. You can add your own descriptions if you wish. Then the second step, which is the material composer, is the most crucial part of the whole application. It's where you enter the data for substances. This is basically where you enter the composition of the product, and all of the following fields related to the documentation are dependent on this data. It's very crucial to enter the data correctly, and you are given all sorts of options how to enter the data for chemicals. You can search our substance database, which contains roughly 500,000 substances, using the chemical names, CAS numbers, EC numbers, REACH numbers. You can also assign some certain hazard classes related to those substances. Let's say I would like to find the substance ethanol, and then the application returns all the substances which contain ethanol in them, and you see that many other substances are there listed, but we are specifically interested in only ethanol, and in such a case we can enter the CAS number of ethanol, and now the application will return only the specific substance we are looking for, and we can then also add some certain hazard classes, because in terms of REACH registered ethanol, it has a specific concentration limit, and we want to, let's say, choose this specific substance, and I'll add it in a content of 80%. Let's say we want to add some water to our product as well. I'll enter 10% of water, and I'll enter a bit of xylene as well, and I'll just start by typing the CAS number of xylene, and then we can choose different classifications of xylene based on the age statement of this hazard class. I have entered a xylene CAS number, and I have entered the hazard classification of 400, and then the application filters out the substances which are matching my search criteria, and let's say I want to add 10% of this xylene as well. The application will automatically calculate the final classification of such a mixture based on the provided substances inside of it. If I want to reduce the content of xylene to 5%, then the final classification of the mixture would change, because final classification of the mixture is dependent on the classification and concentration of substances which are present inside of it. If I want to keep the concentration of xylene at 10%, I simply change the concentration back to 10%, and this is then the final proposed classification of such a mixture that I have prepared. I can simply then click continue. In the next step, physical chemical parameters are entered, and if we have this data from testing, we can enter it. Let's say I know that this mixture is colorless, and it has an odor of a characteristic organic solvent, because it's the nature of such a mixture, and then I click continue. On the next step, we can check mark some specific criteria for such a product, if let's say if it's sold to the general public, because additional restrictions might apply, and if there are like different options of products, because different products have different specific requirements for them. And the next thing is that we can check whether we agree with the proposed classification, because sometimes your expert judgment might result in you wanting to change the classification of such a mixture, and if that's the case, you can click on enable edit and change the proposed classification of the mixture. So if we know that some certain hazardous classification is not applicable for such a mixture, let's say the aspiration hazard based on the viscosity of the product, we can then simply remove this hazardous classification. On the next step is extremely crucial because you can save all the accompanying documentation which is related to your specific product. And in this step, you can save all sorts of documentation. You can save original safety data sheets, compositions. You can also save all sorts of accompanying documentation, such as certificates of analysis and so on. And then further complement the idea of centralization, because with this application, you can have all the data of your chemical product centralized at one spot. You don't have to use multiple platforms to search for multiple documents. You can have all the prepared documentation and all the accompanying documentation for such products at a single spot within this Chemios application. It allows you to import all sorts of document files such as Word documents, PDF documents, Excel tables, and so on. We offer full support for attachments. The last step before we can finalize the product is simply an overview of all of the data that we have entered for such a specific product. You can see that is an overview. If we agree with the provided data, we simply click Save to Product List and Finalized. This test product 1 gets displayed on our product list, and we can then do all sorts of activities with this newly prepared product that I'll show in the near future.